Welcome, lords and ladies, to Kingdom Elemental Tactics. I am SocioPsycho and this is Mob Reviews, and today we'll ask that burning question: is this game worth your time and your money? Yes to no, no to yes, and why so? This was created by Chronic Logic LCC. It is a strategy, tactical, arena-style combat game with a small campaign and a larger skirmish options or availability. It is actually decent if you can get past the graphical quality of the game, and let's find out exactly why it may be decent. When we go into your option settings, you do have graphic quality. Like I said, the game is very basically graphic, and while the graphic quality of the game may be low, and I have not had any tearing or clipping during my play. More importantly, I have not had any crashes during the game, so the graphic may be small, but at least it's stable. Sound volume, they are not exactly a slider, but it is a button push low half, as you can see. The sound in the game is actually done quite well. Some catchphrases when you click on an opponent can get redundant. Instead of saying every time you click on an opponent they're going to do a call sign, it should have been every other time or some such. We'll have broken up the monotony of that, but you can turn it down a bit. The music in the game though is actually done pretty well, and it really helps set a theme of the game and the precipice of the battle or the story. Blood, like I said, very basic game, not anything to be impressive about. Now they do have a tutorial, which is always nice, and the game is very simplistic in its capability. Now perhaps you did not notice any screen resolutions options. When you load up the game, you do have a choice in between full screen or windowed mode, and you have a large variable of screen resolutions available. I've been playing at 1920 by 1080 and it's been running at 60 frames per second. So let us begin. And first we'll talk about the options you have available to you. These options will include your challenge mode. Challenge modes actually offer a fair bit of content, so if you do get this game and you do enjoy it, you do have a lot of content to keep you occupied for hours to come. Now you have the availability for Destiny mode, which is, from what I can tell, the representation of a endless mode, where you continuously combat against enemies until eventually you just are overwhelmed. If you don't want to do a Destiny mode, you do have the availability to pick what sort of waves you want to face and the tier of strength that they are, as well as the difficulty in the game, as there is easy, medium, and hard difficulty in the game, and that comes down not only to the damage that is dealt, but also the availability of troops that you have. So you need to be more tactical and aware, and every second of every choice you make on a harder difficulty will matter significantly. So the game does have options and availability for you to play extra content, as well as challenging levels which set you up against opponents with a preset of troops, not a option to bring in the troops that you want. That's why it's a challenge mode. If you want to just play one of the single levels as well in the campaign, you have that availability, which is nice. You can choose in between. The worlds are more like chapters, so it should have said levels, but and then the round, as you can see, pretty simplistic. Not a problem at all. You have the availability to play as you wish to. Now something else to note is the fact that once you beat the campaign, once you complete the story through the game a first time over, it will have a automatic play plus style in the game. Everything that you've unlocked will remain unlocked during your second playthrough. This is really nice because it allows you the availability to unlock more abilities and more troops that you would not have been able to get through the first gameplay. Now you do have the availability to play the creatures that you may want to during the first gameplay, but it's really about your choice. So we're talking more about a completionist over than anything else. Everything becomes available to you, but it's up to you to decide which ones you want to really unlock. But if you're a completionist and you want to get everything, then you just play a little bit more and you have that availability. As you can see, it's very fair in its choices and options. Now, it does come down to sort of a idea of how you want to handle the situation. Swordsmen are your basic tanks, and taunting in this game is very important, as the enemy will come out in waves. You have archers, which are just that. Now, every unit will have 3 abilities at the bottom. These could be passive abilities, but they will all have at least one castable ability, which you, the player, will have to use, such as a fire arrow. It'll pretty much just do extra damage to the enemy. So if you have 5 archers and you all cast fire arrow, you're going to be doing a huge surge of damage to the enemy. You have a healer, heal, group heal, resurrect, pretty simplistic. Necromancer can raise a skeleton. Now they do have times of the availability. You can't just spam these back to back. That's an important thing. The 35-second cooldown may not seem like a lot, but if we look up here on the next wave, it's 30 seconds. As you progress through the game, the time scale of how fast the enemies come out will slimmer down. So on this map, it's 30 seconds to wave 2. And that doesn't mean that in a map, if you have battled an enemy and the enemy is not dead yet on wave 1, when wave 2 pops out, you still then will have to deal with wave 1 and 2. So it's up to you to understand how to manage your troops. But the time scale of the abilities that you have do play a part as they start on cooldown. You have a monk, which is pretty much just a melee damager. He's supposed to do a lot of damage. He's a lizard monk, it would appear. You have a druid, which roots, thorn shield, and strength. So increases somebody's damage output. Anybody who hits that person who has a thorn shield takes damage. It has these tools and availabilities. It's all about synchronicity and how you want to combine your troops so they can be backed up together for the most benefit, whether it be putting a pirate who then goes in rage. Deal 5% damage to Cutthroat. In exchange, he will do 3 times normal attack rate. So if I put the pirate in rage mode, and then I also have my druid cast strength on him, which will double the attack damage of my pirate, who's also getting 3 times the damage, you can see there is a large variable of damage output if you put the correct units together, and this allows you to actually play the game in a strategic manner. You have Paladin, and you have Elemental. Elementist is probably the strongest character in the game by himself. I mean, like I said, there are ways to group units together to make them even more powerful off abilities. I think the Elementalist is very good because Firestorm, which does a large amount of damage to every enemy creature on the map, can really help clean up if you're falling behind and you have a swarm of little guys or little enemies. This will allow you to have a little more edge against your opponent. So when we go in here, you can see that the level design is very simplistic. And that's why I say it's more of a arena combat strategy game than anything else. It does have a story, yes, but the level design, this is pretty much what you're going to see. A slab of terrain, and the terrains may be different as the worlds go on, so you'll see 4 or 5 different terrains. But it pretty much comes down to this. Graphically, it is a little undesirable, but the combat and the way the game tactically works together can be entertaining once you get past the graphic element of it. Now, one thing that is slightly annoying is the fact that you don't have the availability to keybind any of these abilities. That's slightly annoying. In the options menu, you didn't see a way to rebind keys. And so what that means is that I have to click and drag every creature that I want to put out here. Different missions will have different amounts of money. The higher up in the difficulty the game progresses forward, the larger of the money you'll have. But as you can see, while you can easily right click to eliminate them and start over to what pattern you want, I have to go back down to the bar. Now in this level it's not a huge deal because there's only 2, but when you have a cap of 9 units, and you want to place 5 archers, it's a bit annoying to have to go back and forth 5 times. Besides that, there really isn't anything that is overly annoying. You have the availability to bind the keys in a RTS fashion, such as Control 1 for him and Control 2 for her. So I have her selected, I'm going to hit 1, now I have him. Hit 2 again, and as you can see, I can swap back in between them with no issues. Now the casting of the abilities and the passive abilities that you can see are pretty simplistic. If you have it unlocked, passive stun, passive block capability, but you will have to manage any special abilities that they have. The combat structure in the game is simplistic due to the fact that you have the availability to pause the game when you do need to. This is very important. It plays into the tactical aspect of the game, so you can easily pause the game when you want. Therefore, it's not a real-time strategy. It's a turn-based strategy. And you have the availability to cast your spells, cast your taunts, and in larger and more difficult battles, this is really prevalent to understanding what is going to go on. Now, at the end of a mission, you do have the little overall score sheet of what's going on. It would have been nice if there was a way to have a profile on the beginning of a page to see the hero overall stats of your entire play, but you can just get it here so far after a battle. It's not a huge loss. At the same time, it gives maybe the information you want, maybe the information you don't want. And one thing I like is after you click past that screen, it immediately gets you right back into the combat, throwing you right back into the next level, as each world has about 5 to 7 rounds, or waves depending on the world, and once you complete the first round, it will pop you into the second round immediately. No holds bar about it. The game is actually entertaining, and it does come down to a story element slightly. Now, the game does have a campaign mode. The campaign mode may be short, but it still does have some merit to it. And this also comes down to the fact that it has a story. Now, the story definitely does not take itself seriously, and due to the value of the size and style of the game, that's probably a good thing, that the game doesn't try to take itself too seriously. So it has good voice acting, yes, but it's not something that's really going to propel a sense of epic clawization or some sort of, we are going to fight the forces of darkness. It gets by in a story fashion, but it's the combat that picks up really the gameplay in the tactical sense rather than the story. The story can make you smile and be like, well, that was weird or that was interesting, but it's not going to be something that you remember this game for or play the game for. It will just come down to a tactical sense. But I'll let you hear the voice acting for yourself so you can see that the voice acting in the game, whether it be the character clicks or the story element, is not annoying. And it's not going to degrade on your gameplay, which is very important. It does not degrade. It may not offer that much to it, but at least it doesn't take away.
Massage parlor. Rotten kids. I'm older than trees. Right. Story 2. After defeating the fiery beast on the Bridge of Despair, our heroes ventured forth towards the Crypt of Death. I thought it was the Crypt of Doom. Oh, there's a footnote. The Crypt of Doom and its subsidiaries, LLC, sued the Crypt of Death for ye old copyright infringement and got it closed down. All Crypt of Death's mobs were laid off, given a severance pay of 3 gold coins, and sent on a BRB hiatus. What? BRB hiatus? Mobs' severance pay? These days are dark indeed. A wizard shouldn't need to support himself with fantasy voice-over jobs like this. But how else could I pay for the upkeep on my really high tower of stone with the really comfortable chairs made of onyx and unicorn hooves? A wizard needs a place to brood, plot, conjure, damn it!
Yeah, that was fantastic. One take wonder.
You know I'm a real wizard, don't you?
Aw, that's super.
So as you can see, the voice acting in the game is very unique, but at least it's done in a semi-professional manner. I guess it still would be professional even if it is weird or kooky or goofy or whatever terminology you may desire for that. Which brings us to really the combat element of the game. The combat element of the game does have a strategic and tactical element, as we've briefly covered. Now, as you've seen, in the battles themselves, you have large variations, or possibility of large variations, of enemies that you will have to fight. But you have the choice in between what you take into battle with you. And there is a cap of 9 units, and the money cap as well, so it does come down to a personal choice of, well, I think this would be the better option to take rather than over this. But it's the tactical sense that really drives it forward. It does rely on a holy trinity, the tanking, healing, and damage. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because that's really what anything in life is about. Someone needs to take the blunt of the damage, someone needs to be contributing a lot of firepower, and we need medics. When I first started playing the game, I was slow off to get into it. I was put off by the graphic quality of the game, and the story didn't add anything to it for me, as I enjoy a good solid story. But once I played more of it, once I found that the tactical sense was actually enjoyable, where I could position my troops, and I could focus my targets down, and I could easily command my troops, and I didn't find any issues within the combat. Yes, we've been over this. Graphically it's simplistic, but the tactical management of telling my troops to attack, and then they'll attack, and then they'll automatically attack somebody else, and the only thing I have to micromanage is the usage of the abilities. Really, when it comes down to it, the only thing that I have a flaw or a annoyance with is the taunt on the swordsman. That's about it. Your DPS units have the availability to DPS, and they are going to automatically DPS. It's nice to be able to use Necromancer's Raise the Dead and have more skeletons on the battlefield and be like, ha 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 ha. But the only problem that I have with the game is the taunt of the warrior. It would have been nice if there was a little cooldown bar on whatever enemy you cast a taunt on. Therefore, you could see how long before the taunt fell off. And while this may not be needed in all sorts of games, this is something that is preferred, or would have been preferred in this game, because it then relies you to have to continuously micromanage and spam your taunts onto the enemies so they don't get behind your tanks and destroy all your DPS. It's not a huge deal if you're on top of it, but it's just a little bit of an annoyance. But like I said, the combat has fluidity to it. Your archers will shoot, your mages will shoot, whatever unit you're using as DPS will easily attack the enemy. And I found that the controls in order of ease to use on commanding my troops was not a problem at all. I could easily select, I could easily keybind, and I had no problems whatsoever in the actual combat sense, which is very important. So at the end of the day, while the interface is basic, it gets by, it does have a few hiccups here and there with the placement of troops and not allowing you to be able to do it as fast as you want. And the same thing with some of the selecting of the enemy units, but I found that selecting your units and binding your units was fairly easy. The combat has a fluidity of it, far be it if it's graphically simplistic, but that is the aspect of the game. I never felt as if it was wasting my time, and that's the most important thing I can tell you. I had no performance issues whatsoever, and I never felt as if there wasn't a way for me to win a battle, or that the time I was putting into the game wasn't being respected. I didn't have a frustration on the control method or the combat method. I never found myself being angered or annoyed by the enemies I was facing or how I was able to combat the enemies I was facing. It was enjoyable for the time I wanted, and for $5 on Desura, it's an easy recommend. It will come down to, unfortunately, due to the graphic quality of it, to I don't know about that, but if you do like tactical turn-based strategy games, this is one to look at. Thank you everybody for listening and watching. For I've been SocioPsycho, and I'll see you next time.